Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment on the weekend show. One of the most popular conversations in Nigeria is fuel, fuel, fuel. Now, why is this important? The battle between local refineries and the federal government versus the rest of the world. Countries such as South Africa, such as Saudi Arabia, will refine their own crude, and so the production cost per barrel may be below $20. For Nigeria, if we have to get it to the point of sale, it will cost us about $35. If there's a oil price crash, the likes of Saudi Arabia and countries where they do their own refining will be able to cut their losses, and they will be okay. But the way it is set up in Nigeria, if there's a price crash, we now get in debt. And so there has been the conversation about refineries. Every year we're being promised that the Port Harcourt refinery will be up and running, and then we get extensions. Then it was the Dangote refinery, which we were told would get up and running by December 2023. However, this year all we've heard are so many stories and the back and forth and complaints and the likes. We have also seen alleged reports about the NNPC and OVH and selling downstream sector. Who is earning the money which is being paid for subsidies? Every government and administration will tell you that they've taken off subsidies, they're not paying subsidies, but millions and billions and trillions still go back into some oil servicing. Why can't we fix our refineries? Why is this taking so long? Are some people benefiting from this or not? This and more will be the conversation on our political segment today. And joining us we have
Comrade Igo Akeriga, who is the president, Civil Liberties Organization, and a member, Nigerian Guild of Editors. Good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Welcome. So, you heard my introduction. What's your thought about our local refineries and where we found ourselves after all these years, especially in the recent past where President Muhammadu Buhari, when he was coming into power, promised he will fix the refinery. And we remember his popular video saying who is defrauding who is coming who, that there's no oil subsidy. And then you see where we are today. Increased fuel prices, refineries have still not picked up, and the masses are crying.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting conversation that confers two issues. One, that of shame. Two, that of incapacity and incompetence on the part of, I would say government. I say so because if you look at even the revised Petroleum Industry Act, that is PIA, that was signed into law last year by former President Muhammadu Buhari, who made himself the oil minister of the country. And then, of course, Tinubu has come in now. He has also made himself the oil minister. The question to ask is, why are Nigerian presidents always interested in that oil portfolio, that minister of petroleum resources? That is where to begin the conversation. And the whole issue is just about, a conspiracy to shortchange Nigerians. A lot of people try to put the blame on NNPC, and sometimes they will reduce it to an individual, which is that of the GMD of NNPC. It is far, far, far much beyond that. It is not about, NNPC is an institution, and don't forget it's already a limited liability company now that has been unbundled. The government pretended that it has moved away from running the day-to-day affairs of the NNPC. So as a private company, what do we still see as Nigerians? Have we seen anything change? If you ask me, I will tell you, no, nothing has actually changed, because as long as the president holds on to that office of Minister of Petroleum Resources and then just appoint somebody who is a Minister of State, who apparently, in this case, we have Heneki Lokbobiri, who is the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. What does it really do? All of the decisions still come from Mr. President. So I see that every president wants to use the NNPC as a cash cow, right, to try and, warehouse some funds. But what will you then blame whoever manages the NNPC at any point in time? He who pays the piper dictates the tune. So usually I don't agree when people try to personalize the behemoth, the issue of oil politics in Nigeria, which, of course, for me, it has both local and international dimension. Who are those, exploring our oil? The IOCs, the international oil companies. It is just recently, in the last 5 years or so, we have Belema Oil and a few of them, local players who are now moving into exploration. And with their involvement in oil exploration, you see IOCs like Shell Petroleum Development Company, Mobil, and some of them even divesting from Nigeria because, well, the reason for divest, a lot of them say they are moving away from fossil fuel to clean energy, which is CNG, compressed natural gas, LPG, and all of that. But for me, there's much more beyond that. As we speak, we are struggling with, we are supposed to have an OPEC quota of about 2 million barrels a day. We are doing 1.6 million barrels at the moment. But the bulk of this is stolen. The issue of theft. Who are those stealing Nigeria's oil? The last time I was exposed to the command and control center of the security architecture that manages the entire oil and gas assets in the Niger Delta, you would be shocked at the level of illegal refineries in the Niger Delta. There are well over 9,000. What am I talking about? They are close to about, I have the figures, I'll look at it now. It is so much. About 5,780 of them, illegal refineries. But before I came into this, I checked the figures. We have about 4,780 of them destroyed by the security forces. As you destroy, more are growing. If you look at that, if you look at the security roadmap, the one that overlooks the entire Nigeria, particularly when Nigeria has its oil assets, Imo and Abia State has the largest number of illegal refineries, where you could see red dots when I looked at the command, I visited the command and control center. So it's shameful. If you then move westward towards, the central area, that is the west area of the Niger Delta, where you have Tompolo's company, Tantita active, you could see green. There's a whole lot of reduction in illegal oil refinery. While the west is reducing in illegal oil refinery, you see the eastern part and the northern part of that topography increasing in establishing illegal refinery. And then the argument has been for people from the Niger Delta. I'm from the Niger Delta, and then the argument will be you can't steal your own natural resource, and all of that. That the resources actually belong to the Niger Delta people. And so, if the government is not allowing them to have 50% and they pay some to the center as we had in the 60s, then of course people will go and set up illegal refineries. But the argument also, if you stretch it to the flip side, who are those actually involved? How is the business thriving? It is also the politicians, people who hold power. And earlier I talked about the president holding. I'm not saying the president is involved in illegal refineries. But why has Nigeria as a country been unable to deal with the issue? So that is a fundamental question. And why is Nigeria not able, as a country really, because it's a mono-source economy. We derive almost our forex from oil and gas. At the end of the month, the 36 state governors come to Abuja to share money. Once they share, everybody goes back. And that's it. They wait again for the next month end to return to Abuja. Now, the government lately has been saying that, have been expressing a lot of concern that there are leakages and, of course, leakages in the system where oil is stolen. If the government is so seriously concerned, why has it not treated oil theft as a treasonable offense? Set up special courts, all right, to try these so-called oil thieves. Because I am also told, I'm a journalist, I'm also told in the course of investigation that many of them that are arrested gets released. They just get calls that they should release them. So who are those making the calls for these oil thieves to be released? So a whole lot of questions. And in the ladder, in the chain, if you look at it, the chain, it is Nigerians that are holding the shorter end of the stick, while those who are benefiting from this theft, of course, are those in government and those who are well placed. So it's not, the NNPC per se is not trained to carry guns to fight oil thieves. It's just trained to, it's basically regulation and oil marketing, like you have Aramco in Saudi Arabia. But the security forces, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the police, the DSS, if you go to the Niger Delta, you see a cluster of security forces. Many of them are not interested in going to Sambisa Forest, but they are very interested. They even lobby to be posted to that region. So what is the attraction? For me, there's a whole lot of issues there, and the politics of oil.
So many issues which you've brought up, and I have so many follow-up questions, but we have two guests virtually joining us. Let's hear their overview.
Okay, so we have Titi Lokpe Anifo Salami, who is a lawyer and MD, Olataram Oil and Gas Limited. And we also have Dr. Billy Gels Harry, who's the president, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Morning. It's good to be here.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I would like to know, I'm sure you've been following up on the conversation that we've been having here in the studio. What are your thoughts on the government's response to oil producers, refusing to sell crude to local refineries?
Okay. For me, Titi Lokwe,
Yes,
should I
please.
respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first off, I think we need to understand that the Petroleum Industry Act is not new. It came into force during the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, and we all agree that to sanitize and fix the oil sector, we need the Petroleum Industry Act. So it's surprising that the same stakeholders who were part and parcel of the formulation of this reform are kicking fiercely against this regulation, because at the basis of this is one thing: we have to, as a nation, put a huge stop to fuel scarcity. We have to, as a nation, strengthen our own local refiners such that we mitigate the harshness of running the business within that sector, and also ensure that we prioritize our own people over and above profiteering. So for me, it is a welcome idea. For me, I believe that it is time for us to implement it. This law has been in place since 2021. This is 2024. So the same stakeholders who were part and parcel, who agreed that we needed to have the domestic crude oil supply obligation, for example, should not now come to say, no, it can't work. Rather, I believe that all stakeholders, including DPR and the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, and then the LOCs and IOCs can come together to fashion out ways such that uh, the harshness of the new law would not be too much about robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I believe that it is the way to go, but we can come together, ideate, and see how to go about it.
All right, thank you.
Sir, can we hear your thoughts about the current state of our local refineries, plus the role the government has to play as a regulator, but we also see them as players in the space at the moment? What are your thoughts?
Okay, well,
Okay.
Go on, sir.
Well, yeah, I think you need to point the mic to somebody so we can be able to do it very well. My thinking is that our local refineries should be given top priority. We should, as a matter of fact, accelerate our decisions, in form of policies and actions by government and the NNPC to ensure that our local refineries are up and running and they are efficiently run too. Clearly, we can see where the leakages of our forex is coming from. It's all about petroleum and just only PMS importation, mostly. And we just import it, we consume it. There is no value addition to how our country's economic growth is going to be enhanced by this imported, PMS. So the fact that we have a Dangote refinery that is already set to roll out is a very encouraging one. We do encourage them and sympathize with them also for some of the challenges they have. We hope that the government will get around those issues and start providing crude oil to them. Port Harcourt Refinery and Warri Refinery has also gone in an advanced way by way of preparedness to grow into life. So I think these three refineries and the bottler refineries that are existing in the country should be encouraged through and through, so that we can have domestic fuel to run our economy, and then also to be able to export, So that's my take on that.
Okay. Dr. Billy, when Comrade was speaking, he mentioned something about the previous President Buhari and the current President Tinubu making themselves Minister for Petroleum Resources. And he stated that it's a conspiracy to shortchange Nigerians. I want to know if you agree with that.
Well, I don't agree with him to the extent that it's a conspiracy to shortchange Nigerians, but I do not, see really any justification, for that decision. I recall when President Buhari was clearly making his appointment publicly known as Minister of Petroleum, that I came out against it as the president of the Chamber of Commerce at the time, because if the idea was that his presence there was going to mitigate corruption, I didn't see why that would be, because it then means if there was corruption in agri, or corruption in health, or corruption in any of the ministries, then he was going to appoint himself as minister over that. And then he's going to be thinned out without any concentration on specific assignments, which is supposed to manage the resources and the administration of the government of Nigeria. So to the extent that our presidents keep appointing themselves as ministers, I think it's in bad taste, and that should discontinue, because they have better jobs to do and more assignments, given to them by the Nigerian people to be able to govern efficiently. And to that extent, I agree with them, but that is to shortchange Nigeria. I don't agree.
Okay, thank you. I want to bring Comrade back in. Comrade, you spoke about over 5,000 illegal refineries and the likes. And I recall a week ago watching a video where the Nigerian Navy found some illegal refinery where they say could produce close to 2 million barrels, thereabout. I find it difficult to understand why once these places are found, they are destroyed. Because if it matters a lot and they can actually refine locally, while the big names like Dangote, who were always quick to throw, the Kaduna Refinery, the Port Harcourt Refinery, why can't government formalize this modular refinery system and have them producing more oil, which would now be within a legal framework and will now make money for the country?
Well, basically, I see this as, I deliberately use the word conspiracy. If you have your citizens who have the capacity to refine crude oil into PMS, into AGO, which is diesel and all of that, and then you just go, you destroy them. I'm not saying it is proper to do so. I'm not saying it is an acceptable practice for anybody to connect pipes into the government pipeline and then divert crude to far-flung hidden locations in forests and start refining. But the point here is that it is becoming almost intractable for the government to stop this practice. So you rightly said that why can't the government, for example, mobilize these individuals, bring them out, encourage them to come out, and then tap into their knowledge? The government is not doing that as far as I'm concerned, because first, there's also an intention to try and institute a monopoly. The government wants to have a total control of the sector. Yes, it is so because, one, that is the only source of our national income. But I do seriously agree that it is time for us to encourage these individuals to come out. Apart from the devastation, ecological devastation, that occurs in every area. If you look at the Niger Delta map now from the air, or if you look at as I said earlier, I was privileged to see the Security Command and Control Center overlooking the entire region. You could see that well over 38% of the entire Niger Delta is already being destroyed. You could see, because when the Air Force bombs, whether it is the canoes or the platforms that they use or the big tanks that they have constructed deep inside the forest, usually these places are inaccessible. So they construct these platforms, they bring the materials in gradually, and they're able to construct very huge storage tanks. And then you can't take them out. There's no way you can move them. No aircraft can move them, can lift them. There's no access to water or sea to be able to transport them to a safe place for destruction. So the only option is for security forces to destroy those illegal refineries at their location, which has collateral damages to the environment. Now, the issue about the common definition of madness by anybody is when someone does the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Now, Nigeria, as I remember, Obasanjo was oil minister. I think Jonathan recused himself. He didn't appoint himself. He appointed someone else as oil minister. I remember that now. But after Jonathan, you kept seeing every successive president appointing themselves as. Now, and it is not working. So who should take the blame? If the sector is failing, are we not going to blame the president who made himself the #1 man in that sector? If I were the president, I'll take myself out, appoint somebody, and then I can hold him responsible. For me, that is why I said that, that there's some kind of conspiracy here, or somebody is deriving some benefits. Now, back to the politics of oil marketing, oil supply, fuel queues, Dangote refineries, and all of that. Before I came into the studio, I read a report where marketers in Nigeria has invested about 3 trillion naira, even before Dangote started building his refineries. Now they've invested that, with in mind to import fuel, because the 4 refineries clearly are not working, and so they have licenses to import and distribute to Nigerians. With the coming on stream of the Dangote refinery, now, let me also make this point. Currently, as I said earlier, Nigeria produces about 1.6 million barrels per day. The report that I read, which is also in the public domain, it said that Dangote is requesting for 650 metric tons of that chunk that Nigeria is producing. So that is well about 42% of the total production capacity of Nigeria to him. And don't forget, initially, when the Dangote refinery was established, the NNPC, which is, of course, the government monopoly, has about 27% buy-in stake in Dangote refinery. But with time, the government divested those stakes to 7.2%. So the reason the NNPC gave was that the fossil fuel, which the Dangote refinery is focusing heavily on, is no longer very popular around the world, particularly with all these COP19, COP20, COP21, global meetings where, global attention is shifting away from, food derivatives to CNG, to clean energy, to even EVs, electric vehicles, and all of that. So, that is a different conversation.
Yes.
Really. And Dangote, if you look at the last crisis between Dangote and NMPDR, NMPDR was blocking these oil marketers who have invested about 3 trillion naira, that they must go to Dangote to buy. And Dangote is selling through gantry. Gantry is you bring your truck in, then they load your truck right in there, instead of supplying the crude to farm tanks for distribution. So that created a lot of problems and created the distribution network issue. So if you look at how the United States, because for me, as far as I'm concerned, yes, it is good. Everybody was excited that Dangote refinery was coming on stream, that it was going to serve the interests of Nigerians. But from what is playing out so far, Dangote refinery is a personal business. It is even seeking to become a monopoly, just as it has gotten a monopoly in the cement sector. And the government has a responsibility to break that. How was the United States able to break, monopolistic behemoth? We have the Sherman Act, and then the Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914 in the United States, when America discovered that individuals are forming conglomerates, they are forming even, going into measures at acquisition, buying up small companies, and then they seek to control the American economy. And the U.S. government at the time thought, even up to now, they thought that it was not fair. And so they began to, they introduced the Antitrust Act, to break those monopolies. So the MPDRO was, rather than as a regulator, that should be interested in ensuring that no single individual is able to control the PMS supply chain. Rather, we're supporting Dangote until the marketers, the private marketers, reported to President Tinubu, who then gave, we saw that when Tinubu gave instruction that, look, they can import. Those who want to go to Dangote, it's a free market economy. Those who want to go there. So the fight is still on. As I said, there's a whole lot of things that Nigerians are not being told.
Let's bring Titi Lokpe in.
Yeah.
Titi Lokpe, I do have a problem with the government being a regulator and being a player in the sector. As much as they'll say there's now NMPCL and there's NMP, like you can't be a judge in your own case.
In your own court.
So what's your thoughts on this and the way forward? Because the same monopoly some people will accuse the Dangote of is the same monopoly of sorts that the government is trying to do under a regulatory institution. What are your thoughts and the way forward before we come to Dr. Billy for his closing statements?
All right, thank you very much. Indeed, Nimo Judes in Kosasua, you cannot be a judge in your own court. However, we need to understand, first of all, what is the role of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission? What is the role of DPR? What does the petroleum, what does the PIA Act provide for? What is the essence or the purpose of the domestic crude oil obligation, supply obligation? What is the essence of it? Now, when we look at this thing, we need to address it altruistically, without sentiment, without bias, assuming that we as Nigerians do have regulatory bodies and the Nigerian government whom we trust to be able to do things as it ought to be. Are we going to be questioning the role of NUPRC as a regulatory body? Yes and no. I think that when we are talking about this issue, especially in the upstream sector, first is, can we look at the law the way it was drafted and then come to the reality and then the tenability of this regulation? First and foremost, if you look at it, now NUPRC didn't come up with this law, with this regulation just like that. There is a law that gave the regulation, the DSCO, life. Now, this law came into place as an act of the National Assembly. So it means that first reading, second reading, third reading, consultations and what have you, every member of Nigeria, by virtue of their representative, agreed that we should have these stipulations. Why do we want to have these stipulations? To provide level playing ground for not just producers alone, but also for refiners. Second question, if Dangote, Aliko Dangote is not the person in question, are we going to question the role of NUPRC if it wasn't Aliko Dangote, if it was someone else, without an antecedent of trying to be a monopolistic business entity? Are we going to question this regulation? 2 or 3. Number 4 is that before the announcement was made, suffice to note that the DSCO, the regulation, had been in place since 2023 after Section 109 and Section 8 of the PI Act came into force, along with, of course, other provisions of this PI. So it meant that we had 2021, we had 2022, we had 2023, and then 2024 to address this issue through what? Through amendment by the National Assembly. So, if the law says 1 + 1 is 2, and now the reality is making it seem like 1 + 1 is equals to 3, can we, with press statement or press release, change the reality? No, we have to go back to the National Assembly that implemented the law to now do what? Try to make the corrections. However, a perusal of this law would make you know that indeed, if we follow the law the way it is, step by step. I mean, number one, it is not just that all the producers are supposed to be selling to local refiners at once. It is if DPR is able to showcase that there is a lacuna, if DPR is able to show that there is a shortage, and then the NUPRC will now call for quotation. Also, Section 109 sub 4 expressly stated that, A, it is not mandatory. It's supposed to be free will of both the buyers and the sellers. Now, if you now even go down into the same, the domestic crude oil obligation, that regulation, you will see that there are instances where the law says, okay, indeed, if you fail to comply with this regulation, you're going to incur a penalty. However, there are situations where we are not going to penalize you. If you're able to show that, okay, there was force majeure, if you're able to show that the buyer is unable to accept the allocated crude volume, if you're able to show that you could not transfer the allocated crude for reasons beyond the control of both you, the buyer, and also the seller, or if the buyer cannot pay, the same law also made arrangements for how the local refiners should pay. So I personally believe that if we follow the law the way the law has stipulated it, I think that we should be thanking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We should be thanking NUPRC. We should be thanking DPR for opting to put a stop to the sabotage that we currently have. Because even in America, it is nation first. It is your country first. So before you think about the profiteering, before you think about making the money with the international buyers, you think about your nation first. And of course, it is not the first step. It is about, is there a scarcity? If there is a scarcity in the nation, if there is a shortage in the nation, can the oil producers prioritize local refiners first? So for me, I'm not looking at it from the angle of Dangote or not Dangote. I'm looking at it from the embodiment of the law. And I think that some of the things that the IOCs or the LOCs ought to be calling for is transparency and utter observance of the law, of the PIA.
Thank you so much, Titi Lokpe. Because of time, I would have to cut you short because I really need to hear from Dr. Billy for his way forward. What is the way to go? Because these obviously are not problems which can be solved in one day. Titi Lokpe has said there are some commendable moves by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What are your closing remarks on the way forward?
Well, first of all, let me, without being attempting to be a spokesman for NMDPRA, let me clarify some issues. There's no time NMDPRA has stopped marketers or local players from importing petroleum products. If anything, they are still issuing licenses for those who have capacity to import. We have challenges of assessing forex and also selling at the proper price to ensure that imported fuel by marketers and retail outlet owners meets the standard of standard business practice of investment and profit. But other than that, the way forward into all of this is like Ms. Anifowoshi said, let us follow the law and let country first be the new order. And if possible, let the president divulge himself from being the Minister of Petroleum so that we can have a clearly defined role for everyone to play. And other than that, the challenges that we have with crude oil supply to refineries locally should be addressed with the Naira-denominated sales. And if the independent producers are clamoring that they are not able to make those that obligation work, we should be able to find out why it is so transparently and proper solutions. We don't need to discuss these things only on the pages of newspaper and television. We should be able to set proper processes to do due diligence, deep investigations, and resolve matters, because we must put our country first. And our country is already bleeding as it is today. So that's my take, that all stakeholders should come together. The government should put the independent producers, the IOCs, the regulators, both NMDPRA and NUPRIC, and of course the refinery managements also, and also us who are the extension of all of these regulations and petroleum product distribution. So we can give a 3-4 days detailed time to seek results, practical results that should be able to save Nigeria. That's my take.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. Billy Giles Harry, Titi Lokpe, Anil Fawoshe, Salami, and Comrade Igo. Obviously, we need to continue this conversation on another day because there are so many we need to pick out of it. So this is just an introductory conversation around this, but we will definitely come back and bring you on. There's
But if
so
I have
much.
1 minute or 30 seconds.
I'll give you 30 seconds
Please, I
because
just want to make a
yes.
point. 30 seconds.
Okay.
The point is, the root cause of this crisis is the defective constitution that we are operating. The Civil Liberties Organization disagrees that unifying the resources of Nigeria and forcefully banding Nigerians together, and then at the center, the federal government, captures the resources of the people, capture the thinking of the people, and distributes them illegally through an illegal constitution is at the root of our national
So
crisis. So
constitutional
we need to
amendments.
restructure the country, do a proper constitutional amendment that takes cognizance of the input of Nigerians. Otherwise, we are not going to get out of this.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Comrade. Thank you, Dr. Billy and Titi Lokpe. We'll now have to transition to tender for entrepreneurial sports.